The Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations stood like a monument to cooperation on the neutral moon of Thessar 7. Its crystalline spires reached toward the purple sky, catching the light of 3 distant suns. Species from across 200 star systems sent their brightest young minds here to learn, to grow, and, most importantly, to understand one another. The Academy had stood for 6,000 standard cycles without incident. That record was about to change. Kethral adjusted his ceremonial robes as he walked through the main corridor toward Orientation Hall 7. His 4 legs clicked against the polished floor in a rhythm that betrayed his nervousness. As a Volari, he stood nearly 2 meters tall, his slender frame covered in soft gray fur that rippled when he moved. His species had evolved on a gentle world of endless meadows and mild seasons. They were herbivores, scholars by nature, and deeply committed to peaceful resolution of all conflicts. Today was the first day of the new academic cycle, and Kethral had been selected as the student representative for his cohort. It was an honor that filled him with equal parts pride and terror. He would be responsible for helping the new students integrate, for answering their questions, and for maintaining harmony within the group. The orientation hall was already filling when he arrived. Kethral took his position near the entrance and began greeting students as they filtered in. He recognized several species immediately. A group of Melori floated past, their transparent bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as they communicated silently with one another. Behind them came a massive Grothian, easily 3 meters of rock-like hide and muscle, each footstep sending tremors through the floor. Despite their intimidating appearance, Grothians were known for their gentle dispositions and love of music. Kethral checked his information tablet. According to the roster, they were expecting 47 new students from 32 different species this cycle. Most were familiar to him from his studies. He had memorized the basic biological and cultural information for each, determined to make everyone feel welcome. Then, he saw the entry that made his heart skip a beat. Student designation, Vexen AR species, Crethily classification, Apex Predator, Category 7, Homeworld, Creth Prime special accommodations, separate feeding schedule, reinforced seating, mandatory psychological monitoring. Kethral had heard stories about the Crethily. Everyone had. They came from a death world where everything evolved to kill or be killed. The Crethily had emerged as the dominant species by being the most efficient killers of all. They were carnivores who had historically viewed other sentient species as potential prey rather than potential allies. Their inclusion in the galactic community was controversial and recent. Only in the last century had they been deemed stable enough for integration, and even then, many species protested their presence. A Crethily at the Academy was almost unprecedented. The last one had attended over 200 cycles ago, and that had ended badly when the student had instinctively attacked a classmate who startled them. Kethral felt his fur standing on end. He tried to calm himself. The Academy would not have admitted a Crethily without extensive screening. This Vexen AR must be exceptional, well-controlled, safe. He almost believed it. The next student through the door made Kethral forget about the Crethily entirely. She walked upright on 2 legs, which was common enough. Her skin was an unsettling pinkish brown, exposed rather than covered in protective scales or fur. She had dark hair on top of her head that fell past her shoulders, and her eyes were a startling shade of green that seemed to assess everything they touched. But it was what Kethral's tablet said that truly disturbed him. Student designation, MHN species, human classification, Deathworlder, Class 1 persistence predator, homeworld, Earth, Sol system, special accommodations, none requested. The tablet continued with a biological summary that Kethral could barely bring himself to read. Humans were a relatively new species to the galactic community, having achieved faster than light travel only 2 centuries ago. They came from a world that was, by any reasonable standard, a nightmare. Their planet had extreme temperature variations, seismic instability, violent weather patterns, and an ecosystem where nearly everything was toxic, venomous, or simply aggressive. And the humans themselves were perhaps the most terrifying product of that hellish environment. They were persistence predators. Unlike the Crethily, who relied on overwhelming power and speed to take down prey, humans had evolved to simply never stop. They could track prey for days, weeks even, walking while their target exhausted itself trying to escape. Their bodies could heal from wounds that would kill most species. They consumed ethanol for recreation. They kept other predators as companions. They had tamed their death world and every dangerous creature on it. But what truly horrified Kethral was a single line in the biological summary. Adrenaline response. Under threat, humans experience a biochemical surge that dramatically increases strength, speed, pain tolerance, and aggression. This response can be triggered by perceiving threats to themselves or others they have bonded with. Humans were pack hunters. They formed attachment bonds with other species. And, when those bonds were threatened, they became something far more dangerous than even their normal terrifying baseline. The human woman walked up to Kethral and smiled. The expression involved baring her teeth, which his instincts screamed was a threat display. He forced himself to remain still. "Hi there," she said in perfectly accented galactic standard. "I'm Emma Chen. I'm looking for Orientation Hall 7? Her voice was pleasant, almost musical. Kethral's logical mind knew the smile was a human gesture of friendliness. His prey instincts wanted him to run. "You have found it," he managed to say. "I am Kethral, the student representative. Welcome to the Galactic Academy." "Thank you so much." She extended one of her hands toward him. Kethral stared at it, unsure what to do. The hand had 5 digits, each ending in a blunt claw. He knew from his studies that this was a human greeting gesture called a handshake. Slowly, he reached out with one of his own manipulator appendages. Emma's hand closed around it gently. Her skin was warm, startlingly so. He could feel the strength in her grip, carefully restrained. She could crush his appendage if she wanted to. She didn't. "It's nice to meet you, Kethral," Emma said. "I'm really excited to be here. I've studied so much about all the different species in the galaxy, and now I get to actually meet them." There was genuine enthusiasm in her voice. Kethral felt some of his fear receding, replaced by confusion. This was a Deathworlder, a persistence predator from a nightmare planet. She should be terrifying. Instead, she seemed almost friendly. "The feeling is shared," Kethral said, which was not entirely a lie. "Please, find a seat. The orientation will begin shortly." Emma thanked him again and walked into the hall. Kethral noticed how the other students gave her a wide berth. The Mallory's bioluminescence flickered in patterns of alarm. Even the massive Grothian pressed himself against the wall as she passed. Everyone knew what humans were, even if they had never seen one before. Emma seemed oblivious to their fear, or perhaps she was simply used to it. She found a seat near the middle of the hall and sat down, pulling out a small device that she began tapping on. Kethral had barely recovered when the corridor darkened. The Crethali had arrived. Vex Nar was everything the stories had described. He stood over 2.5 meters tall, his body a nightmare of evolution's cruelty. His scales were black as void, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits, constantly scanning, constantly assessing. His mouth, when it opened slightly, revealed rows of teeth designed for one purpose only. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate and silent despite his massive size. Every student in the corridor froze. The Mallory's lights went dark entirely, their species' fear response. The Grothian whimpered, a sound that should have been impossible from such a large creature. Vex Nar's eyes fixed on Kethral. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Kethral stared back. He felt like prey. He was prey. His entire evolutionary history screamed at him to flee, to hide, to do anything but stand here frozen like a meal waiting to be consumed. "You are the representative." Vex Nar's voice was a deep rumble, like stones grinding together. It was not a question. "Yes," Kethral whispered. "Direct me to my place." Kethral's legs moved without his conscious command, leading Vex Nar toward the orientation hall. He was aware of every step, aware that a creature designed by millions of years of evolution to hunt and kill was walking behind him. His heart hammered against his ribs. His breath came in short, quick gasps. They entered the hall. The effect was immediate. Students who had been quietly talking fell silent. Bodies pressed against walls and floors, everyone trying to make themselves smaller, less noticeable. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vex Nar surveyed the hall with those terrible yellow eyes. His gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on each species, assessing, categorizing. Kethral knew what he was seeing. Prey. Nothing but prey. Then, Vex Nar's eyes found Emma Chen. The human had looked up from her device when the room went quiet. Now she was staring at the Crethily with an expression that Kethral could not identify. It was not fear. Her body was still relaxed, her posture unchanged. She was looking at Vexnar the way one might look at an interesting specimen. Vexnar's head tilted slightly. His nostrils flared. Kethral could see confusion in his body language, though he did not know how he knew that. You, Vexnar said, pointing at Emma. You do not fear. Emma's mouth curved into that teeth-baring expression again. Should I? The question hung in the air. No one moved. No one breathed. Vexnar began walking toward Emma. His steps were slow, measured. It was not the charge of a predator attacking. It was something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or challenge. He stopped directly in front of her seat, looming over her small frame. Emma had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, but she did not look away. She did not flinch. I am Crethily, Vexnar said. Apex predator. I have killed creatures larger than you with my bare hands. My species once hunted others for sport. My ancestors ate sentient beings. I know, Emma said. I read your file. And, yet you do not fear. Emma shrugged, a human gesture of dismissal. On my planet, we have a saying. It takes a lot to scare someone who grew up wrestling crocodiles and running from forest fires. Vexnar's head tilted further. I do not understand. Crocodiles? Reptilian predators. They've been around for about 200 million years, basically unchanged. They're perfect killing machines. When I was 7, one got into our backyard. My grandmother killed it with a shovel. The hall was utterly silent. Kethral could not process what he was hearing. A 7-year-old human child's family member had killed a perfect predator with a primitive tool? Your grandmother, Vexnar repeated slowly. She was 63 at the time. Made a nice purse out of the skin. Vexnar stared at Emma for a long moment. Then, he made a sound that Kethral did not recognize at first. It was rough, rhythmic, coming from deep in his chest. He was laughing. You are from a death world, Vexnar said. A true death world. Not the controlled environments the others come from. You are like me. In some ways, Emma agreed. In other ways, probably not so much. Vexnar sat down in the seat next to her. The reinforced seat that had been prepared for him was on the other side of the room, but he ignored it. The chair groaned under his weight but held. Tell me more, he said. Tell me about your world. And, just like that, the most dangerous predator in the room was having a casual conversation with the only other creature present who did not fear him. Kethral watched this exchange with a mixture of terror and fascination. He had been worried about having a Crethily in the cohort. He had been worried about having a human. Now they were sitting together, and he did not know what to think. The orientation continued with Administrator Prelax, a wizened old Tessari, taking the podium to welcome the new students. Kethral barely heard the speech. His attention kept drifting to Emma and Vexnar, who were whispering to each other throughout the presentation. The Crethily seemed genuinely engaged, his predatory intensity focused entirely on what the human was saying. At one point, Emma pulled up something on her device and showed it to Vexnar. His eyes widened. His tail, which had been still, began to twitch. He made that laughing sound again. What is that creature? He whispered, loud enough for Kethral to hear. A honey badger, Emma whispered back. Doesn't look like much, right? But, it's one of the most fearless animals on Earth. It attacks lions if it feels threatened. Doesn't matter how big you are. It will fight anything. Your world made this? My world made a lot of things. I'll show you more later. Vexnar's tail was wagging now. Wagging. Kethral had not known Crethily tails could do that. He had assumed they were only used for balance and as weapons. The orientation ended, and students began filing out to find their quarters. Kethral watched as Emma and Vexnar left together, still talking. The other students gave them an even wider berth now, terrified of both. You seem troubled, young one. Kethral startled at the voice. Administrator Prelax had appeared beside him, moving silently on her many legs. Forgive me, Administrator. I am simply processing. The human and the Crefali. Prelax's compound eyes glittered with what might have been amusement. An unexpected pairing. They seem to have formed a connection. Indeed. This is, in fact, why we place them in the same cohort. Kethral turned to stare at the administrator. You planned this? We suspected it might occur. Humans have a documented tendency to form bonds with other species, particularly those considered dangerous. Their planet forced them to find allies wherever they could. Even their domesticated companions were once predators who could have killed them. But, why put them together intentionally? Prelax was silent for a moment. Because the galaxy is changing, young one. The Crefali wish to integrate fully, but they struggle. Other species fear them too much to form connections. They are isolated, alone, and isolation breeds resentment. Resentment breeds conflict. And humans do not isolate. Humans do not isolate, Prelax confirmed. They adopt. They bond. They turn enemies into family. It is perhaps their most dangerous trait, and also their most valuable. Kethral thought about this. You are hoping Emma will adopt Vex and AR? I am hoping they will adopt each other. The galaxy needs bridges between species. The old fears must be overcome. And, if anyone can befriend the unfriendable, it is a human. Kethral watched the doorway where Emma and Vex and AR had disappeared. He thought about the way Emma had smiled at the predator, unafraid. He thought about the way Vex and AR had laughed, a sound no one had expected from a Crefali. I hope you are right, Administrator. So do I, young one. So do I. The first day at the Galactic Academy was over. But, Kethral had a feeling that the real story was only beginning. The next morning cycle brought the first actual classes. Kethral arrived early to the Universal History Lecture Hall, determined to observe his cohort and ensure no conflicts arose. He need not have worried about attendance. Every student was present, seated as far from the center of the room as possible. Every student except two. Emma Chen and Vex and AR sat in the very center of the hall, their seats pulled close together. They were talking again, Emma gesturing animatedly while Vex and AR listened with obvious interest. Occasionally he would ask a question, and Emma would launch into an explanation that lasted several minutes. Kethral found a seat near the front and tried to focus on his preparation materials. It was difficult. He could hear snippets of their conversation. And, then, there's the octopus. 8 arms, 3 hearts, blue blood, and they can solve puzzles. Some people think they might be as smart as dolphins. And dolphins are the ones who hunt in packs and have been known to kill for sport? That's them. They're also one of the few animals we know of that recognizes itself in a mirror. Self-awareness, basically. Your planet is terrifying. You have no idea. Want to hear about army ants? Professor Velsik arrived before Vex and AR could hear about army ants. The professor was a Thrallian, a species known for their eidetic memory and encyclopedic knowledge. His form was vaguely serpentine, with multiple manipulator arms extending from his midsection. He surveyed the classroom with his 3 eyes, noting the seating arrangements. Interesting, he murmured, looking at Emma and Vex and AR. Then, he began his lecture. Universal history was a required course for all first cycle students. It covered the rise and fall of galactic civilizations, the formation of the galactic community, and the ongoing challenges of interspecies relations. Professor Velsik was an engaging lecturer, his voice rising and falling as he described ancient wars and hard-won peace. The lecture was about halfway through when the incident occurred. Velsik was describing the Thessari expansion, a period 5,000 cycles ago when a single species had attempted to conquer and enslave others. It was a dark chapter in galactic history, one that had led to the formation of the galactic community as a counterbalance. The Thessari believed themselves superior, Velsik said. They viewed other species as resources to be exploited. Their technology was advanced, their military powerful. For 300 cycles, they dominated 40 star systems. What stopped them? The question came from a Mel Lorry near the back, its lights pulsing with curiosity. A coalition of species banded together. It was the first time so many different peoples had worked toward a common goal. The war lasted 50 cycles and cost billions of lives, but eventually, the Thessari were defeated. Were they destroyed? This time the question came from Vex Nar. His voice was neutral, but Kethral could see intense interest in his posture. No. Genocide was considered but rejected. Instead, the Thessari were disarmed and integrated into the nascent galactic community. It was believed that understanding and cooperation could change them. Did it work? Eventually. It took centuries, and there were setbacks. But today, the Thessari are productive members of the community. In fact, Administrator Prelax is Thessari. This caused a murmur throughout the hall. Kethral had not known that. The Thessari were so widespread now, so normal, that he had never thought about their history. The lesson, Professor Velsic continued, is that no species is irredeemable. Change is possible, even for those who have committed terrible acts. This is why we continue to work toward integration rather than isolation. Kethral thought about Vex Nar, about the Crethali's bloody history. He thought about Emma and her death world that had made humans into something both terrifying and remarkable. Perhaps there was hope for everyone. The lecture ended, and students began to disperse. Kethral gathered his materials and headed for the door, but a commotion stopped him. Near the exit, 3 students had cornered a 4th. The 3 were Holland, a species known for their rigid social hierarchies and aggressive enforcement of perceived disrespect. The 4th was a tiny Pipri, barely half a meter tall, a species that had evolved on a low-gravity world and was physically fragile compared to almost everyone else. "You touched me," one of the Holland was saying, his crest raised in anger. "Your kind is not permitted to touch a Holland." "It was an accident," the Pipri squeaked, clearly terrified. "I stumbled. I am sorry." "Please, I meant no offense." Offense was given. Offense must be answered. Kethral started to move forward. As student representative, it was his duty to intervene in conflicts. But, before he could reach them, someone else got there first. Emma-chan stepped between the Holland and the Pipri. "Hey," she said, her voice casual. "Everything okay here?" The lead Holland looked down at her with contempt. "This does not concern you, human. Step aside." "See, I would, but I really don't like bullies. And this looks a lot like bullying to me." The Pipri offered insult. "We are within our rights to demand satisfaction. By threatening someone half your size who can't defend themselves? Where I come from, that doesn't make you strong. It makes you pathetic." The Holland's crest flushed red, a sign of extreme anger. Kethral felt his heart racing. The Holland were physically powerful, with natural armor plating and reinforced musculature. If they attacked Emma, she could be seriously hurt. "You dare speak to us this way?" "I dare a lot of things." "Now, you can accept the Pipri's apology and walk away like civilized beings, or we can find out what happens when you try to push past me." The Holland looked at each other. Kethral could see them calculating, assessing. Emma was smaller than them, obviously less armored. She should have been an easy target. But there was something in her posture, something in the way she held herself, that gave them pause. She was not afraid. Not even slightly. And that lack of fear was unnerving. The human is correct. Everyone turned. Vex Nar had appeared beside Emma, seemingly materializing from nowhere. His presence changed the calculation entirely. The Pipri apologized. "Honor is satisfied. There is no need for violence." He paused. "Unless you wish to insist?" The question hung in the air. The Holland were strong, but, against a Crethali, they were nothing. Vex Nar could tear through all 3 of them in seconds. The lead Holland's crest slowly lowered. "This matter is concluded," he said stiffly. "The apology is accepted." The 3 of them turned and left, walking just a bit too quickly to be dignified. Emma turned to the Pipri, who was trembling so hard they were nearly vibrating. "Hey, you okay?" "Why, yes. Thank you. I thought they were going to." "They weren't going to do anything. Bullies rarely do when you stand up to them." Emma smiled gently. "I'm Emma, by the way. What's your name?" "Trick. My name is Trick." Nice to meet you, Trick. Want to join us for the midday meal? Vex and AR here knows all the best spots, apparently. Trick looked at Vex and AR with obvious fear. The Crethely was still standing there, a massive looming presence that looked capable of eating the Pipri as a snack. Vex and AR noticed the look and, with visible effort, tried to make himself less intimidating. He lowered his head, tucked his arms close to his body, and softened his voice. I will not harm you, small one. Emma has taught me that there is more to interaction than threat and submission. You are safe with us. Trick looked back and forth between the human and the Crethely. Kethral could see the conflict in the tiny being's body language. Fear warred with something else. Gratitude, perhaps. Or the simple desire not to be alone. Okay, Trick said finally, voice small. I would like that. Emma beamed. Great. Come on, let's go find some food. The three of them left together, an impossible trio, a human Deathworlder, a Crethely apex predator, and a tiny Pipri who had nearly been victimized minutes before. They walked down the corridor, Emma keeping up a steady stream of conversation while Trick gradually stopped shaking and Vex and AR practiced looking non-threatening. Kethral watched them go, feeling something shift in his understanding. This was what Administrator Prelax had meant. Humans did not just form bonds. They created them, pulled others into their orbit, built families out of strangers. Emma had known Trick for less than 5 minutes, and already she was treating the Pipri as someone worth protecting, worth including. And Vex and AR, the fearsome Crethely who should have viewed everyone as prey, was following her lead. He was actively trying to be less frightening because Emma had shown him a different way. Kethral made a decision. He hurried after the group, his 4 legs carrying him quickly. They turned at his approach, and he saw Emma's hand move slightly toward Vex and AR before stopping. She had been ready to signal the Crethely to stand down, he realized. She was already protecting her new packmates. I apologize for the interruption, Kethral said. I am the student representative, and I wanted to ensure everyone was well after that incident. We're fine, Emma said. Just heading to get some food. Want to come? The invitation surprised him. He had expected wariness, perhaps resentment that he had not intervened sooner. Instead, Emma was offering him the same casual inclusion she had offered Trick. Yes. I would like that. They continued on together. For very different beings from 4 very different worlds, walking side by side. And, for the first time since learning about the human and the Crethely in his cohort, Kethral felt something other than fear. He felt hope. 3 weeks had passed since that first day, and the cohort had settled into a rhythm that surprised everyone who observed them. The unlikely group that had formed around Emma-chan had grown steadily, each new member drawn in by the human's relentless friendliness and the protection offered by her shadow, Vex and AR. The Crethely had changed since that first orientation. He still moved like a predator, still scared everyone who did not know him, but there was something different in his eyes now. Where before there had been only the cold assessment of threats and targets, now there was curiosity, engagement, even warmth when he looked at his new companions. He had started sitting differently, Kethral noticed. Instead of the coiled, ready-to-strike posture that was natural to his species, Vex and AR had adopted a more relaxed stance when among friends. He kept his claws retracted whenever possible. He had learned to modulate his voice so it did not sound like an earthquake in conversation. Small changes, but significant ones. All because Emma had asked. Their little group had claimed a corner of the main dining hall as their territory. It was an unconscious choice at first, but it had stuck. Every day at midday meal, they gathered there, Emma, Vex and AR, Kethral, Trick, and the others who had joined over the weeks. There was Gliss, a Melori who had been drawn to the group after Emma spent an entire afternoon asking about bioluminescent communication. Most species found the Melori strange and off-putting because they did not speak with sound. Emma had found them fascinating and had started learning to recognize basic light patterns. Gliss, who had felt isolated and alone, had been so moved by this effort that they had become one of Emma's most devoted friends. There was Breck, the Grothian who had been so terrified on the first day. He had watched Emma from a distance for a week before finally approaching. When he did, stammering and apologetic, Emma had simply asked if he wanted to sit with them. Now the massive stone-like being was a fixture at their table, his deep voice a pleasant counterpoint to the others as he discussed his love of classical composition. There were others too. a Holland named Sorel who had approached Emma after seeing her stand up to his kinsman that first week. He wanted to understand how she had shown no fear, how she had been willing to face down 3 of his species to defend a stranger. Their conversations had evolved into a genuine friendship, one that was causing considerable scandal among the Holland community. And there was Vess, a Crethely female who had arrived at the academy 2 weeks into the term. She was younger than Vex and Ar, smaller, and far more frightened. Unlike Vex and Ar, who had been carefully selected and prepared for integration, Vess had been sent almost as an afterthought by her family, a second child they did not know what to do with. She had been terrified when she arrived. The other students had fled from her on sight, and even the instructors had kept their distance. For 3 days, she had eaten alone, attended classes alone, existed in a bubble of isolation that threatened to crush her. Then, Emma had sat down across from her in the dining hall. "Hi," the human had said, as casually as if she were greeting anyone. "I'm Emma. Mind if I join you?" Vess had stared at her, unable to process what was happening. No one approached Crethely willingly. No one wanted to be near them. And yet here was the small, fragile-looking creature, smiling and asking permission to share a meal. "You want to sit with me?" "Sure. Vex and Ar talks about you sometimes. He says you were in the Junior Combat Academy together back on Creth Prime." "He talks about me?" "Of course. He's worried about you, actually. Says you're having a hard time adjusting. I figured maybe you could use a friend." That had been 2 weeks ago. Now Vess sat with them every day, her anxiety slowly fading as she learned that these strange non-Crethely beings did not see her as a monster. She and Vex and Ar had reconnected, their relationship shifting from formal acquaintance to something like the family bonds that Crethely rarely formed outside their birth pods. Kethral observed all of this with wonder. He had been trained to manage conflicts, to maintain harmony within the cohort. But Emma did something different. She did not manage harmony. She created it, drew it out of people who had never experienced it before. Today, however, there was tension in the air. The group had gathered for the midday meal as usual, but the conversation was subdued. Emma had received news that morning that was causing visible distress. Her government had made an announcement about a new trade agreement, one that would bring humans into closer contact with several species that had expressed concerns about Earth's integration. "They're saying humans are too aggressive," Emma explained, her voice tight. "That we're unpredictable. That allowing us more trade access is dangerous because we might, I don't know, snap one day and start conquering everyone." "That is foolish," Vex and Ar rumbled. "You are the least aggressive being I have ever known." Emma laughed, but it was hollow. "That's not how they see us. They look at our history and see wars, violence, extinction. They look at our biology and see persistence predators, pack hunters, adrenaline junkies. They don't see everything else." "What else is there?" Trick asked. The Pipri had grown more confident over the weeks, their voice stronger and steadier. "I know you are kind, Emma. But I do not know much about human history." Emma sighed. "That's part of the problem. People only hear about the bad stuff. They hear about our wars but not about our art. They hear about our predator instincts but not about how we use those instincts to protect each other. They hear about our aggression but not about our compassion. Then, tell us," Gliss pulsed. "Their bioluminescence formed patterns of gentle encouragement. Tell us the other stories." Emma looked around the table at her friends. A Crethely apex predator. A Valari herbivore. A tiny Pipri. A floating Mellori. A massive Grothian. A reformed Holland. Another Crethely who was learning to smile. All of them looking at her with genuine interest, genuine care. "Okay," she said. "Let me tell you about how humans love." The table went quiet. Even Vex and Ar, who had heard many of Emma's stories, leaned forward with interest. "Humans form bonds," Emma began. "Deep, powerful bonds that transcend logic. We bond with our families, obviously. But we also bond with friends, with communities, with ideas. And here's the thing that I think most species don't understand: we bond with other species." "You have mentioned this before," Kethral said. "The domesticated predators. Dogs." "Yeah. But it goes deeper than that. We bond with animals we can't even communicate with. We keep fish in glass tanks just to watch them swim because they're pretty and it makes us happy. We rescue injured wild animals and nurse them back to health even when there's no benefit to us. We cry when elephants die. We fund organizations dedicated to protecting species that will never know we exist. Why? Vess asked. Her voice was soft, uncertain. What do you gain from this? Nothing tangible. We do it because we love them. Because the universe is vast and lonely and beautiful, and sharing it with other beings makes it better. Because protecting something vulnerable makes us feel like we matter. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Humans have a concept called found family. It means the people you choose to love, the bonds you form by choice rather than blood. We consider it just as valid, sometimes more valid, than genetic relationships. And we extend that to other species all the time. Like you have with us, Bliss pulsed. Emma smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Yes. Exactly like I have with you. Vex Nar made a sound deep in his chest. Among Crethali, bonds are rare. We are taught that attachment is weakness, that relying on others makes you vulnerable. But, since knowing you, Emma, I have begun to question this teaching. What do you mean? I mean that I feel stronger with you than I ever felt alone. When Mahalan threatened Trick, my instinct was not to kill them because they were prey showing aggression. My instinct was to protect my friend. That is not a Crethali response. That is something new. Trick's antennae quivered with emotion. You consider me a friend? I consider all of you friends. Pack. Family. Whatever word you prefer. Vex Nar looked at each of them in turn. Before Emma, I had never experienced this. I thought I was content in isolation, in strength measured only by what I could take. She has shown me a different kind of strength. The strength of what we can give. The table was silent for a long moment. Kethral felt moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes, a Volare response to strong emotion. He was not the only one affected. Breck's rocky surface seemed to be glistening. Bliss was pulsing with warm golden light. Even Sorel, the Holland who had been trained from birth to reject such sentiment, was visibly moved. This is what they should know about humans, Vess said suddenly. Not the wars. This. The way you make others feel. The way you bring people together who should be enemies. The galaxy fears humans because they do not understand this, Kethral added. They see only the surface. The predator. The warrior. They do not see the love underneath. Emma shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. We're not perfect. We've done terrible things too. We've hurt each other, hurt our planet, hurt other species. I'm not trying to pretend humans are saints. No one is asking for saints, Vex Nar said. We are asking for truth. And the truth is that humans have something rare in this galaxy. The ability to see past fear, past difference, past instinct. The ability to choose love even when hate would be easier. That's very poetic for someone who was raised to be an apex predator. I have been reading human literature. Emma gave me a collection of something called poetry. This surprised everyone. Vex Nar, the terrifying Crethali, reading poetry. But it made a strange kind of sense. He was trying to understand Emma's species, trying to learn how they thought and felt. And poetry was perhaps the most direct window into the human soul. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. Breck shared a new composition he had been working on, a piece inspired by the group's unlikely friendship. Bliss demonstrated some new light patterns they had developed specifically for communicating with Emma. Trick talked about their family back home, how they were amazed to hear that their small, fragile child had befriended a Crethali. It was a good meal, a healing one. By the end, Emma's earlier distress had faded, replaced by the warmth of genuine connection. But, as they left the dining hall, Kethral noticed something concerning. A group of students had gathered near the entrance, watching them with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open hostility. He recognized several of them, Holland who had been shamed by their kinsman's association with Emma, Mel Lori who disapproved of Gliss's friendship with predator species, others who simply feared what the group represented. Human, one of them called out. It was a Therath, a species known for their rigid social structures and deep distrust of outsiders. You should be more careful about the company you keep. Emma stopped but did not turn around. Excuse me? Walking with Crethely. Acting as if they are civilized. Do you not know their history? Do you not know what they have done? I know exactly what the Crethely have done. I also know what my own species has done. Would you like to compare body counts? The Theratha's face twisted with anger. You mock me? I'm pointing out the obvious. Every species in this academy has blood on their hands. The Crethely are trying to change, to integrate, to become something better. That deserves respect, not condemnation. They are predators. They cannot change what they are. Vexnar stepped forward, and the gathered crowd flinched back. Even now, even after weeks of seeing him walk peacefully through the halls, his presence triggered primal fear responses. You are correct, he said, his voice carefully controlled. I cannot change what I am. I am Crethely. I was born to hunt, to kill, to dominate. Every instinct I possess tells me that you are prey, that I should take what I want from you without question. The crowd went very still. But, I am not my instincts, Vexnar continued. I am more than the sum of my biology. I can choose to be different. I can choose to see you as people rather than prey. I can choose to build rather than destroy. This is what Emma has taught me. This is what being part of this group has shown me. He gestured to the others gathered behind him. Look at us. Crethely. Human. Volari. Pipri. Mellori. Grothian. Holland. Species that should be enemies, that history and biology have set against each other. And yet here we stand, together, because one human refused to accept that fear must define us. Pretty words, the Therath sneered, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. They are more than words. They are a choice I make every day. A choice any of you could make if you had the courage. The crowd began to disperse, muttering but unwilling to push the confrontation further. Vexnar watched them go, his posture still tense. That was well said, Emma told him quietly. I meant every word. You have changed me, Emma. Changed all of us. Whatever the galaxy thinks of humans, know that at least one Crethely considers your species the most remarkable he has ever encountered. They continued on their way, the group drawing closer together. Kethral walked beside Emma, his mind churning with thoughts. May I ask you something? Of course. How do you do it? How do you see past what Vexnar is, what Ves is, what any of us are? How do you look at beings who should frighten you and see friends instead? Emma considered the question for a long moment. I think it's because I know what it's like to be judged by what you are instead of who you are. Humans get that a lot. People see our history, our biology, our planet, and they make assumptions. They don't bother to look deeper. And so you make an effort to look deeper with others. Exactly. Everyone deserves the chance to be seen for who they really are, not just what evolution made them. Vexnar isn't defined by being a Crethely. Trick isn't defined by being small and fragile. You aren't defined by being an herbivore. We're all more than our categories. This is a very human way of thinking. Maybe. Or maybe it's just a true way of thinking and humans figured it out because we had to. Our planet forced us to adapt, to form alliances, to see potential friends in everything. It was survive together or die apart. Kethral thought about this. The Volari had evolved in gentle conditions, surrounded by their own kind. They had never needed to reach out to other species, never been forced to find common ground with those who were different. Perhaps that was why they were so fearful now, so quick to retreat from anything unfamiliar. But they could learn. He could learn. Emma was proof that such thinking could be taught, could spread from one mind to another. The group arrived at the academic quad, where they would part ways for afternoon lectures. Kethral had a seminar on diplomatic protocols. Vexnar and Emma were both enrolled in comparative physiology. The others scattered to their various classes. Before they separated, Emma pulled Kethral aside. Hey. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For what? For being part of this. For not running away when you saw me and Vex and AR together that first day. For staying when you could have kept your distance. It would have been easy to manage the cohort from the outside, to just do your job without getting involved. But, you chose to be our friend instead. Kethral felt warmth spreading through his chest. I was terrified that first day. I had convinced myself that you and Vex and AR were threats to be managed. And, now? Now I cannot imagine my time here without you. All of you. Emma smiled and clasped his shoulder briefly before heading off to her class. Kethral watched her go, thinking about how much had changed in just 3 weeks. He had come to the academy as a student representative, concerned with maintaining order and preventing conflicts. He was leaving the first month as something entirely different, a member of a family he had never expected to find. And it was all because a human had refused to let fear win. The afternoon passed quickly. Kethral's seminar was engaging, a discussion of how different species approached negotiation and conflict resolution. He found himself thinking about Emma's way of doing things, how she cut through cultural differences with simple kindness. When the class ended, he made his way to the common area where the group usually gathered before evening meal. What he found there stopped him cold. Vess was sitting alone, her posture tight with distress. When she looked up at Kethral, he saw something in her yellow eyes that he had never seen in a Crethali before. Fear. What happened? He asked, moving to sit beside her. There was an incident in my afternoon class. A student said things. Accused me of only pretending to integrate, of secretly planning to eat everyone once I gained their trust. That is absurd. Is it? Vess's voice cracked. Sometimes I wonder if they are right. Sometimes I look at the others and I feel hunger. Not for them specifically, but the predator instinct, it never fully goes away. What if it takes over one day? What if I hurt someone? Kethral struggled for words. He had no experience with this, no frame of reference for battling one's own predatory instincts. Where is Emma? He finally asked. Have you told her about this? I cannot burden her with my problems. She has done so much for me already. That is not how friendship works, Vess. Emma would want to know. She would want to help. Before Vess could respond, Emma herself appeared, with Vex and AR close behind. One look at Vess's posture and Emma was moving, crossing the room with quick, purposeful strides. What's wrong? Vess tried to deflect, but Kethral spoke first, explaining what had happened. Emma's expression darkened as she listened. Who said this to you? What class? It does not matter, it matters to me. Emma's voice was fierce. No one gets to make my friends feel like monsters. Tell me who it was. Vess looked at her with something like wonder. You are angry. For me. Of course I'm angry for you. Your family. The word hit Vess like a physical blow. She made a sound that was half sob, half growl, a release of emotion that Crethali were not supposed to feel. I do not understand, she said brokenly. Why do you care? I am Crethali. I am what everyone fears. I will always be what everyone fears. Emma sat down beside her, close enough to touch but not quite doing so. Kethral watched, fascinated by how the human instinctively understood Vess's boundaries. When I was 12, Emma said quietly, my family moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone. The other kids had heard that humans were dangerous, that we were violent and unpredictable. They were afraid of me. Vess looked up. What did you do? I cried a lot at first. I felt like there was something wrong with me, like I was broken because everyone saw me as a monster. It took a long time to realize that their fear was about them, not about me. Their ignorance didn't make me bad. It just made them wrong. But, the fear, my own fear of what I might become. That's different. That's you being careful, being conscious of yourself. Do you know what separates a person from a monster? It's not instincts or biology or what you were born as. It's choices. It's the fact that you worry about hurting people at all. Real monsters don't have that kind of self-awareness. Vex and AR had been listening silently. Now he spoke, his voice gentle in a way that still surprised Kethral. I have struggled with this same fear, young one. When Emma first befriended me, I wondered if I was deceiving myself. If beneath the conscious choice to be better, the predator was simply biding its time. What changed your mind? I realized that the choice is not made once. It is made every moment, every day. Every time I could hurt someone and do not, every time I could take the predator's path and choose another way, I am proving that I am more than instinct. So are you, simply by sitting here and wrestling with these doubts? Emma nodded. He's right. The people who call you a monster in waiting? They've never had to fight their own nature. They don't know what real strength looks like. But I do. And you have it, Vess. More than you know. Vess was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier. Among Crethali, we are taught that feelings are weakness. That bonds make us vulnerable. But this conversation. I feel stronger for having it. I feel less alone. Because you're not alone, Emma said. Not anymore. You have us. And we're not going anywhere. Kethral watched as Vess slowly relaxed, as the fear in her eyes faded to something softer. He thought about everything he had witnessed in the past weeks, barriers breaking down, understanding growing, former enemies becoming family. Humans were terrifying. Everyone in the galaxy knew that. They were persistent predators from a death world, capable of incredible violence and destruction. But they were also this fierce, protective love. This stubborn refusal to let fear define relationships. This ability to see the person behind the species. If the galaxy truly understood what humans were, Kethral thought, they would not be afraid. They would be awed. The Academy's annual cooperation games were approaching, and the entire student body was buzzing with anticipation. These games were not competitions in the traditional sense. They were designed to test teams of students from different species working together to solve problems, overcome obstacles, and demonstrate that cooperation could achieve what individual effort could not. Every cycle, the cohort representatives selected teams from their groups. The teams would compete against each other in a series of challenges that tested everything from physical coordination to intellectual problem solving. The winning team earned prestige for their cohort and individual recognition that could affect career prospects after graduation. Kethral had been dreading this moment. His cohort was unusual, to say the least. The core group that had formed around Emma was tight-knit and supportive, but they were also a strange collection of species that would never normally work together. 2 Crethali apex predators. A human Deathworlder. A tiny Pipri. A floating Mellori. A massive Grothian. A reformed Holland. And Kethral himself, a gentle herbivore who had never been physically competitive in his life. On paper, it should have been a disaster waiting to happen. The games required physical challenges that the Pipri could not complete. They required stealth and speed that the Grothian could not achieve. They required careful coordination that the Crethali had never been trained for. And they required the kind of team cohesion that usually took months or years to develop. But, as Kethral watched Emma gather the group together for their first training session, he felt something unexpected: hope. Okay, Emma said, clapping her hands together. I know what you're all thinking. We're a weird group. We shouldn't work well together. The other teams are going to be better matched, more coordinated, more experienced. This is meant to inspire us? Soral asked dryly. Emma grinned. I'm getting there. Here's the thing, the games are designed to test cooperation between different species. They reward teams that can use diverse abilities in creative ways. We don't have to be the fastest or the strongest or the smartest. We just have to be the best at working together. And how do we accomplish that? Vex Nar asked. By figuring out what each of us brings to the table and how to combine those strengths. Let's start with inventory. Vex Nar, Vess, you two are obviously our muscle. Speed, strength, senses, you've got it all. What else? Vex Nar thought for a moment. I have excellent night vision. I can hear frequencies beyond most species' range. I am trained in tracking and hunting, which translates to reconnaissance and stealth. I am smaller and faster than Vex Nar, Vess added. I can fit into spaces he cannot. I also have experience with climbing, which many Crethali lack. Perfect. Trick, what about you? The Pipri's antennae twitched nervously. I am small and weak. I do not see how I can contribute. Small isn't weak, Emma said firmly. Small means you can go where others can't. Small means you're less visible, harder to target. Small means you can squeeze through gaps and access areas that would stop everyone else. What's your background? My family are engineers. I studied mechanical systems before coming to the academy. I can repair and manipulate technology that I can physically reach. So you're our tech specialist and our access expert. That's huge, Trick. Don't underestimate yourself. Bliss pulsed with excited light patterns. I can communicate silently. I can coordinate actions across distances without anyone hearing. I am also very good at detecting temperature variations, which can reveal hidden objects or beings. Silent coordination is invaluable, Emma agreed. You're our communications hub. Brack? The Grothian shifted his massive weight uncertainly. I am strong. Very strong. I can move obstacles that would stop others. But I am also slow and loud. I cannot be stealthy. Then, we don't use you for stealth. We use you for power, moving things, breaking through barriers, anchoring positions. Every team needs a rock, and you're ours. Literally. She smiled at him, and Breck's rocky face seemed to soften. Soral? The Holland straightened proudly. My species excels at tactical thinking. We are trained from birth to analyze situations and identify optimal approaches. I can also maintain my composure under pressure and make quick decisions. Our strategist, then. Perfect. Kethral? Kethral felt all eyes turn to him. He had been dreading this question. I do not know what I bring. I am not strong or fast or particularly clever. I am a herbivore. My instincts tell me to flee, not fight. But, you're our representative, Emma pointed out. You've been managing conflicts and coordinating activities all term. You understand how all of us think, what motivates us, what frightens us. That's not nothing, Kethral. That's emotional intelligence. That's the ability to keep a team functioning when stress threatens to tear it apart. You believe I can do this? I believe you've already been doing it. Every time you checked on us, every time you smoothed over a disagreement, every time you made sure everyone felt included. That's leadership, even if you don't call it that. Kethral felt warmth spreading through his chest. He had never thought of his role that way, never considered that the soft skills he possessed might be valuable in something as competitive as the cooperation games. And, what about you, Emma? Vess asked. What do you bring? Emma's smile turned a bit sheepish. I'm a generalist. Humans evolved to be adaptable rather than specialized. I can run for long distances, climb reasonably well, think on my feet, and I'm stubborn enough to not give up even when things look bad. But my real contribution is something else. What? I know how to make teams work. On Earth, we have a long history of bringing different groups together for common goals. Wars, disasters, exploration, we've learned that diverse teams almost always outperform homogeneous ones if they can overcome their differences. That's what I want to do here. Not make us all the same, but make us all effective. The group was silent for a moment, processing this. Finally, Vex and AR spoke. What is our first step? Emma's grin widened. We train. Not to become something we're not, but to become the best versions of what we are. And we learn to trust each other absolutely. Because in the games, hesitation kills. We need to reach a point where every one of us would put our lives in the hands of every other without question. That is a high standard, Soral observed. It's the only standard that matters. And so they began. The first week of training was brutal, not physically but emotionally. Emma designed exercises that forced them to rely on each other in increasingly challenging ways. Trust falls, but with the massive Breck catching the tiny trick. Blindfolded navigation, with Gliss providing directions through light signals that Emma translated. Problem-solving challenges where the solution required every team member's unique abilities. Again and again, they failed. Vex NAR's predator instincts made him a poor team player at first. He kept trying to do everything himself, to solve problems through dominance rather than cooperation. Vess was too timid, always hanging back, afraid to contribute. Trick constantly underestimated themselves. Breck was so worried about hurting someone that he held back even when power was needed. But, slowly, painfully, they improved. Kethral watched the transformation with amazement. He saw Vex Nar learn to wait, to trust, to let others take the lead. He saw Vess grow more confident, stepping forward to volunteer for tasks that frightened her. He saw Trick embrace their value, using their small size and technical skills in ways that constantly surprised everyone. He saw Breck learn to modulate his strength, applying exactly the force needed without fear. And he saw Emma, always Emma, at the center of it all. Encouraging, challenging, pushing, praising. Never giving up on anyone, never letting anyone give up on themselves. It was during the second week that the first real crisis hit. They were practicing a complex retrieval exercise. The goal was to recover an object from the center of a maze while avoiding sensors that would trigger failure if they were detected. Each team member had a role. Vess would scout ahead, Bliss would coordinate, Trick would disable sensors, and the others would move the object once it was accessible. Everything was going well until Vex Nar froze. He was in the middle of the maze, surrounded by shadows and uncertainty, and something in him snapped. His eyes went wide and wild. His body locked into a hunting crouch. His lips peeled back from his teeth in a snarl that sent primitive terror racing through every prey species present. The predator had emerged. "Nobody move," Emma said quietly. Her voice was calm, controlled, utterly without fear. "Vex Nar, can you hear me?" A growl was her only answer. "Everyone stay still. Don't run. Running triggers chase instinct. Just stay where you are and let me handle this." She began walking toward him. Kethral felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Emma was walking toward an apex predator in full hunting mode, a creature that could tear her apart in seconds. "Emma, stop," Sorel hissed. "He is not in control." "I know. That's why I have to do this." She kept walking. Vex Nar's head tracked her movement, those terrible yellow eyes fixing on her with predatory intensity. His muscles tensed for a spring. Emma stopped just outside his reach and sat down on the floor. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "I know you're in there somewhere. I know this isn't who you want to be. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." A long, tense moment passed. Kethral barely dared to breathe. The predator in Vex Nar was warring with something else, something deeper. The friend. The pack member. The person he had chosen to become. Slowly, impossibly, Vex Nar's posture changed. The snarl faded. The hunting crouch relaxed. His eyes cleared, horror replacing the feral intensity. "Emma," he whispered. You didn't. That's what matters. I could have killed you. But, you didn't. You fought it. You came back." Emma stood and, without hesitation, reached out to rest her hand on his arm. The contact seemed to anchor him further. "This is what we're training for, Vex Nar. Not just the games. Learning to be more than our instincts. How can you trust me after that? How can any of you?" The group exchanged glances. Kethral knew this was a pivotal moment. If they pulled away now, if they showed fear or rejection, Vex Nar would never recover. He would believe he was a monster, and that belief would make it true. He stepped forward, forcing his trembling legs to carry him toward the Crethali. "I trust you," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I have seen you struggle against your nature every day. I have seen you choose kindness when cruelty would be easier. One moment of weakness does not erase all of that." Trick was next, their small form approaching Vex Nar without hesitation. "You have protected me since the day we met. You have made me feel safe when everyone else made me feel small. I trust you." One by one, they came forward. Vess, who understood better than anyone the battle Vex Nar faced. Bliss, pulsing with warm, reassuring light. Breck, who reached out with one massive hand to touch Vex Nar's shoulder in solidarity. Sorel, who had been taught that predators could never be trusted, standing beside one and proving that teaching wrong. By the end, Vex Nar was surrounded by his team. His family. And, for the first time since his arrival at the academy, Kethral saw him weep. The tears were strange, almost wrong, coming from that terrifying face. But they were also beautiful, proof that even the most fearsome creature in the galaxy could feel deeply, love deeply, hurt deeply. Emma was the last to speak. This is what we're building here, Vex and AR. Not just a team for the games. A family that can survive anything, including ourselves. You're not a monster. You're a person who is fighting to be better every single day. And I couldn't be more proud to call you my friend. After that day, something shifted in the group. The last barriers fell. They stopped being individuals trying to work together and became something more, a unit, a family, a team in the truest sense of the word. Their performance improved dramatically. The exercises that had given them trouble before became almost easy. They anticipated each other's moves, compensated for each other's weaknesses, combined their strengths in ways that surprised even Emma. Other teams began to take notice. Kethral first became aware of the attention during a communal training session in the Academy's main arena. All the teams were practicing simultaneously, observed by faculty who were evaluating their progress and making predictions about the games. Their team was running a complex obstacle course that required every member's participation. Trick was navigating ventilation shafts to disable security protocols. Gliss was coordinating movements across the team through light signals. Vess was scouting ahead, her smaller forms slipping past obstacles with ease. Vex NAR was providing heavy support, moving barriers and eliminating threats. Breck was anchoring key positions, his massive strength holding open pathways that would otherwise be impassable. Sorel was directing overall strategy, her tactical mind processing information faster than anyone else could. And Kethral was doing what he had learned he did best, monitoring emotional states, identifying stress points, keeping the team functioning as a cohesive unit. Emma was everywhere at once, not in a physical sense but in how her presence permeated the team. She had trained them, inspired them, believed in them. Now she was watching them prove that her belief was justified. They completed the course in record time. Not just for their cohort, but for the entire academy. The silence that followed was profound. Faculty members exchanged shocked glances. Students from other teams stared in disbelief. No one had expected the weird, mismatched collection of species from Cohort 7 to perform at this level. Then, the murmuring started. How did they do that? The Crethely worked with the others. Actually cooperated. The human was coordinating somehow. I saw it. That's impossible. Those species should not be able to function as a team. Professor Velsic, who had been observing from the faculty section, slithered down to the arena floor. His 3 eyes studied the team with obvious interest. Remarkable, he said. I have been teaching here for 40 cycles, and I have never seen such disparate species achieve this level of synchronization. How did you accomplish this? Emma shrugged. We worked together. That's all. That is manifestly not all. The Crethely apex predator impulse should make true cooperation with prey species neurologically impossible. The Pipri size differential should create insurmountable communication barriers. The Mellori nonverbal preference should. Professor, Emma interrupted gently, with all due respect, we stopped focusing on what should be impossible and started focusing on what we could actually do. Turns out that works better. Velsic was silent for a moment. This is a very human approach. Maybe. Or maybe it's just common sense that everyone forgot somewhere along the way. The professor made a thoughtful sound. I would like to document your training methods, with your permission. What you have achieved here has implications far beyond the games. Emma looked at her team. That's up to everyone. We're in this together. The vote was unanimous. If their methods could help others, they were willing to share. Word spread quickly through the academy. The Misfit team from Cohort 7 had done something extraordinary. Species that should have been enemies, predators who should have seen everyone around them as prey, herbivores who should have fled at the first sign of danger, all of them working together in perfect harmony. Not everyone was pleased. Kethral began noticing hostile glances in the corridors. Whispered conversations that stopped when team members approached. An undercurrent of resentment that he could not quite identify. It came to a head 3 days before the games. The team was leaving their evening training session when they found their path blocked. A large group had gathered, representing at least a dozen species. At the front was a Virath named Kexor, the same one who had confronted Emma weeks before. Human, he said. We need to talk. So talk, Emma replied calmly. Your team is an abomination. You have taken species that should never associate and forced them into an unnatural alliance. You have convinced predators to act against their nature, prey to abandon their survival instincts. This is dangerous. Dangerous how? If your methods spread, if others begin to believe that ancient divisions can be ignored, that instincts can be overridden, chaos will follow. The natural order exists for a reason. The natural order? Emma's voice was still calm, but Kethral could see tension in her shoulders. You mean the order where everyone stays in their separate boxes, afraid of anyone different, never growing or changing or reaching for something better? I mean the order that has kept the galaxy stable for millennia. Stable. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know how many wars have been fought because species couldn't understand each other? How many conflicts could have been avoided if people had just talked, worked together, seen each other as people instead of categories? Conflicts are resolved through strength and dominance. That is the way of things. That's one way. It's not the only way. And it's definitely not the best way. Kexor's face twisted with anger. You are a Deathworlder. You understand nothing of civilization. On your planet, you killed and conquered until there was nothing left to oppose you. Now you come here and try to remake the galaxy in your violent image. Something shifted in Emma's posture. Kethral recognized it, the same focused intensity he had seen when she confronted the Holland bullies, when she walked toward Vexenaar in his predator state. She was not backing down. Let me tell you something about my planet, she said quietly. Yes, we're predators. Yes, we've fought wars and committed atrocities. We're not proud of everything in our history. But we've also learned from it. We've learned that cooperation beats competition, that diversity strengthens us, that reaching out to others makes us more than we could be alone. She gestured to her team. Look at us. A human. 2 Krethali. A Volari. A Pipri. A Mellori. A Grothian. A Holland. Species that have feared and fought each other for generations. And here we stand, together, stronger than any of us would be apart. That's not an abomination. That's evolution. That's progress. That's what the galaxy should be. Pretty words do not change reality. No. Actions do. And our actions speak for themselves. The confrontation might have escalated further, but Administrator Prelax chose that moment to appear. Her Thessari form moved through the crowd with surprising speed for her age, and her presence immediately commanded attention. What is happening here? She asked, her voice carrying the weight of authority. We are expressing concern about the human's influence, Kexor said, his tone becoming more formal in the administrator's presence. And the human is expressing her philosophy, Prelax replied. Both of which are acceptable forms of discourse at this academy. What is not acceptable is blocking pathways, surrounding other students, and engaging in what appears to be intimidation. Disperse. The crowd began to break up, but Kexor held his ground for a moment longer. This is not over, human. The games will prove which approach is superior. Looking forward to it, Emma said. When the crowd had gone, Prelax turned to the team. Her compound eyes studied each of them with obvious interest. You have caused quite a stir, she observed. We're just trying to do our best, Emma replied. You are doing considerably more than that. You are challenging assumptions that have stood for centuries. Not everyone will appreciate such challenges. With respect, Administrator, maybe those assumptions needed to be challenged. Prelax was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal. When I was young, my species was still recovering from the shame of the Thessari expansion. We were taught that we had been wrong, evil, that our nature was fundamentally flawed. It took many generations before we could see ourselves as something other than the monsters of history. What changed? Other species reached out to us. Not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine desire to understand. They saw past our history, past our reputation, and found the people beneath. It was transformative. The administrator looked at Vexenaar and Ves, at the way they stood with the group rather than apart from it. What you are doing with the Krethali is important, perhaps more important than you know. Their integration has been slow and painful, hampered by the same fears that once isolated my people. But, you are showing that change is possible, that connections can form across even the deepest divides. I'm not doing anything special, Emma said. I'm just treating people like people. That, young human, is precisely what makes it special. Prelax turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The games begin in 3 days. I suggest you be prepared for more than just the standard challenges. Your success has attracted attention, not all of it benevolent. She departed, leaving the team to consider her words. What did she mean by that? Trick asked nervously. She meant that some people will try to sabotage us, Sorrel said grimly. The games have rules, but there is always room for interpretation. Challenges can be made more difficult for specific teams. Accidents can be arranged. Then, we need to be ready for anything, Emma said. No matter what they throw at us, we face it together. We've come too far to let anyone take this from us. Vexnar stepped forward, his massive form casting shadows in the corridor's light. I will not let them harm my family. Whatever comes, I will meet it. We all will, Ves agreed. Together. Kethral felt a surge of emotion that surprised him. Fear, certainly, but also determination. Pride. Love for this strange family he had stumbled into. Together, he echoed. And, meant it. The 3 days before the games passed quickly. The team trained harder than ever, preparing for every contingency they could imagine. Emma worked with Sorrel to develop strategies for potential sabotage attempts. Vexnar and Ves practiced controlling their predator instincts under increasing levels of stress. Trick worked on accessing systems quickly, in case technological interference was attempted. Breck practiced modulating his strength for a variety of scenarios. And Kethral worked on the most important element of all, keeping everyone calm, focused, and unified. The morning of the games dawned clear and bright. The entire academy had gathered in the main arena, thousands of students and faculty filling the observation levels. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Kethral stood with his team in the staging area, watching other teams prepare. There were 12 teams in total, each representing a different cohort. Most were composed of species that traditionally worked well together, members of allied civilizations, groups with complementary abilities, teams that had been carefully balanced for optimal performance. And, then, there was their team. The Misfits. The impossible combination. The one that everyone was watching. Remember the plan, Emma said quietly. Whatever happens out there, we trust each other. We adapt. We don't give up. That's our strength. That's what makes us different. And if they try to sabotage us? Ves asked. Then, we improvise. That's what we do. The games began with a fanfare and a ceremonial speech from Administrator Prelax. She spoke of cooperation, understanding, the eternal mission of the Academy to bridge divides between species. Kethral noticed her gaze lingering on their team more than once. The first challenge was straightforward, a relay race through an obstacle course that required each team member to complete a section suited to their abilities. Large beings had sections requiring strength. Small beings had sections requiring agility. Quick beings had sections requiring speed. Their team performed admirably. Vexnar and Ves dominated their sections, their predator speed and power on full display. Breck anchored a section that required immense strength, holding open a massive door while others passed through. Trick navigated a maze of small passages with expert precision. Bliss coordinated the handoffs flawlessly through light signals. Sorrel managed timing and strategy. Kethral kept everyone calm during the high-stress transitions. And Emma did what humans did best, she adapted. Her section was designed for beings with greater physical capabilities, but she compensated with endurance and stubbornness, refusing to stop until she had completed every obstacle. They finished second, behind a team of Mallory and Thessari whose species had been allies for millennia. A respectable showing that proved they could compete at the highest level. The second challenge was more complex, a puzzle that required combining different types of perception. Visual patterns, sound frequencies, chemical traces, temperature variations. Each species could detect some elements but not others. Only by sharing information could the puzzle be solved. This was where their team truly shone. Bliss detected temperature variations that revealed hidden pathways. Vex and AR and Ves heard frequencies beyond anyone else's range, picking up audio clues that guided their progress. Trick's engineering expertise helped decode mechanical elements. Kethral's herbivore sensitivity to chemical traces identified important markers. Breck's unique perception of vibrations through the ground revealed underground passages. But it was Emma who put it all together. She stood at the center of her team, receiving input from everyone, processing it faster than should have been possible, seeing patterns that emerged only when all the pieces came together. They finished first. Not by a small margin, by a substantial one. Their closest competitors were still struggling with integration when Emma's team completed the final element. The arena went silent, then erupted in cheers. It was the first time in the history of the games that such a diverse team had won a major challenge. Kethral looked at his teammates, seeing joy and disbelief and pride reflected in faces of scales and fur and bioluminescence. They had done it. They had proven that their approach worked. But the games were not over. And, as Kethral noticed the dark looks being exchanged among certain observers, he knew the real test was still to come. The third challenge was announced at midday, and Kethral immediately felt that something was wrong. The standard format for the cooperation games called for 3 challenges of increasing difficulty, each designed to test different aspects of teamwork. The third challenge was traditionally a rescue scenario. Teams had to locate and extract a target from a dangerous environment while avoiding hazards and working under time pressure. But this cycle's third challenge was different. The final challenge, Administrator Prelax announced, her voice carrying across the hushed arena, will be a live scenario conducted in the Wilderness Preserve on the Academy's northern sector. Teams will be deployed simultaneously to locate a signal beacon hidden somewhere in the preserve. The environment has been seeded with natural hazards and simulated threats. The first team to recover the beacon and return it to the extraction point wins the games. Kethral's blood ran cold. The Wilderness Preserve was a massive tract of undeveloped terrain, maintained in its natural state for ecological study. It was dangerous under the best of circumstances, home to wildlife that had been imported from dozens of planets. A live scenario there, with simulated threats added on top of natural hazards, was unprecedented. Emma's face was carefully neutral, but her eyes told a different story. She had recognized the change too. "This is new," Sorel murmured. "The final challenge has never been conducted in the Wilderness Preserve before." "Someone wanted to change the odds," Vex and AR rumbled. "A wilderness environment favors certain species. Predators. Those accustomed to harsh conditions. Like Crethely," Ves added. "And humans. Or it puts us at a disadvantage," Emma countered. "A lot of people think Deathworlders are only good for violence. They might expect us to charge in and get ourselves killed." "What do we do?" Trick asked, their voice tight with anxiety. "I am not built for wilderness survival. I will slow you down." "No one is being left behind," Emma said firmly. "We go in together, we come out together. That's non-negotiable." "But, Trick." Emma knelt down to look the Pipri in the eyes. "Your size is an advantage in wilderness just like anywhere else. You can hide where others can't, move through spaces too small for predators, spot details that larger beings miss. We need you. Not despite what you are, but because of it." Trick's antennae slowly stopped their anxious twitching. "You really believe that?" "I know it. Now let's figure out how we're going to win this thing." The teams were given 1 hour to prepare before deployment. Emma gathered her team in a quiet corner of the staging area and began strategizing. "The preserve is 300 square kilometers of varied terrain," Sorel reported, pulling up a holographic map. "Forests, rocky highlands, wetlands, and a central canyon system. The beacon could be anywhere. Where would you hide it if you wanted to test cooperation?" Emma asked. Sorel studied the map, her Holland tactical training evident in the way her eyes tracked terrain features. "The canyon system. It offers multiple approach vectors, requires different skills to navigate safely, and has natural hazards that would challenge any single species." "That's what we'd expect." "Which means they might put it somewhere else to throw us off. Or they might put it exactly where we expect, counting on us to overthink it," Kethral suggested. Emma nodded. "Good point. We need to split our approach. Not the team, never the team, but our attention. Gliss, can you maintain coordination across the full preserve if we spread out our search? The Mellori pulsed thoughtfully. At that distance, my light signals would not be visible through dense forest. But I can move to high ground and serve as a relay point between groups. That won't work if we're staying together, Vex and AR pointed out. Who said anything about groups? Emma smiled, that sharp human expression that meant she had a plan. We stay together physically, but we search differently. Vex and AR, Ves, you have the best senses. Can you detect anything unusual in the environment? Sounds, smells, disturbances? Within a certain range, yes, Vex and AR confirmed. Our senses are designed for tracking. A beacon giving off an artificial signal would stand out against natural background. Trick, what about technology? The beacon will be transmitting. Can you detect that? If I have access to the right equipment, yes. But we were not permitted to bring external tools. What about the equipment we're wearing? Emma gestured to the standardized survival suits that all participants had been issued. These have basic sensor packages. Could you modify one to amplify its detection range? Trick's eyes widened. That would be against the rules. The rules say we can't bring external equipment. They don't say anything about creative use of what we're given. A slow smile spread across Trick's small face. I could strip components from multiple suits, combine them into a makeshift scanner. It would reduce the functionality of the donor suits, but, take mine, Breck said immediately. I do not need the suit's full capabilities. My hide protects me from most environmental hazards. And, mine, Gliss pulsed. I am naturally adapted to most conditions. Mine as well, Vex and AR added. Crethali are built for hostile environments. Within minutes, Trick was elbow deep in suit components, their small hands working with precision that belied their size. Kethral watched in fascination as the Pipri combined elements that should never have been compatible, somehow making them work through sheer engineering talent. It will have limited range, Trick reported. Perhaps 1 kilometer for a strong signal, less for weak ones. But it should detect the beacon if we get close enough. That's all we need. We'll let Vex and AR and Ves narrow down the general area with their senses, then use the scanner to pinpoint the exact location. The deployment horn sounded. Teams began moving to their assigned transport vehicles for the journey to the wilderness preserve. Emma gathered her team for one last moment. Whatever happens out there, remember what we've learned. Trust each other. Communicate. Adopt. We're not just trying to win a game anymore. We're proving that species don't have to be enemies, that cooperation beats competition, that fear is not the only way to relate to each other. And, if we lose? Trick asked quietly. Then, we lose knowing we did our best and stayed true to who we are. But, I don't think we're going to lose. They boarded their transport with that confidence burning in their hearts. The wilderness preserve was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Ancient forests of imported alien trees stretched toward a purple sky. Rock formations jutted up like teeth from rolling hills. In the distance, the canyon system cut a dark wound through the landscape. Teams were deployed at different points around the preserve's perimeter, creating a roughly equal starting position. A signal flare marked the beginning of the challenge, and, suddenly, the peaceful wilderness became a battlefield of a different kind. Kethral stayed close to Emma as they moved into the forest. Around them, the team flowed like water, each member finding their role. Vex and AR and Ves ranged ahead, their predator senses alert for any sign of the beacon or of other teams. Breck brought up the rear, his massive form providing security against anything that might approach from behind. Soral walked beside Emma, offering tactical observations. Gliss hovered above, watching for threats from the air. Trick rode on Breck's shoulder, conserving energy while monitoring the makeshift scanner. They had traveled perhaps 2 kilometers when Ves signaled a halt. Her hand signs were different from the light language they had developed with Gliss, part of the redundant communication systems Emma had insisted they develop. Something ahead, she reported. Not the beacon. Movement. Multiple beings. Another team? Soral asked. I think so. But, their approach is strange. They are not moving toward the center of the preserve. They are moving toward us. Emma's expression hardened. Interception. They're trying to slow us down. Or worse, Vex and AR rumbled. In the wilderness, accidents happen. If we were injured, who could say whether it was a team or a natural hazard? Kethral felt fear rising in his chest, but also something else. Anger. After everything they had worked for, after all the barriers they had overcome, someone was trying to undermine them through underhanded tactics. Can we go around them? Emma asked. There are more to the east, Vess reported. They are boxing us in. How many total? At least 2 full teams that I can detect. Perhaps more. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, she smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. They're counting on us to play defense. To try to avoid them and focus on the beacon. They figure if they slow us down enough, one of the other teams will win while we're dealing with them. That is a reasonable strategy, Sorel admitted. It would be, if we were reasonable people. Emma turned to face her team. New plan. We don't avoid them. We go through them. Through? Trick squeaked. Not violently. Just, assertively. They want to intimidate us, slow us down, maybe provoke us into doing something that gets us disqualified. So we don't give them what they want. We walk right past them like they're not even there. That seems dangerous, Kethral said carefully. It is. But, it's also the last thing they'll expect. And, it sends a message, we're not afraid. We're not going to be bullied. We're going to win this on our terms, not theirs. Vex and AR made a sound that might have been a laugh. I enjoy this plan. Lead the way. They continued forward, directly toward the beings Vess had detected. Within minutes, they emerged into a clearing where 2 teams were waiting. Kethral recognized Kexor at the front, his Therath face twisted with anticipation. Human, he called out. Going somewhere? Emma didn't break stride. Yep. The beacon isn't going to find itself. Perhaps you should reconsider. The wilderness is dangerous. Your unusual team might encounter difficulties. Thanks for the concern. We'll be fine. She walked past him. Not around, not through, but past, as if he were an inconvenience rather than a threat. Her team followed, maintaining formation, projecting an absolute confidence that Kethral did not entirely feel. Kexor's face flushed with anger. You cannot simply watch us. They were past him now, entering the forest on the other side of the clearing. Behind them, Kethral could hear confused murmuring. The interception teams had expected resistance, negotiation, fear. They had not expected to be ignored. They will follow, Vex and AR reported quietly. I know. But, they've already lost the psychological advantage. Now they're reacting to us instead of the other way around. You understand tactics well for a Deathworlder, Sorel said with obvious respect. Humans have been fighting each other for most of our history. We learned a few things about psychology along the way. They pressed deeper into the preserve, moving faster now. The pursuing teams fell behind, hampered by their own lack of coordination. Individual species moving in the same direction was not the same as a team moving as one, and Emma's group had perfected their coordination through weeks of training. As they approached the canyon system, Trick suddenly called out from Breck's shoulder. Signal! I am detecting something. Very faint, but it is there. Direction? Northwest. Into the canyons. Emma nodded. Vex and AR, Vess scout ahead. Find us a path down. The 2 creathily disappeared into the rocky terrain with predatory grace. Within minutes, Vess returned to guide them to a narrow path that wound down into the canyon system. The descent was treacherous. The path was barely wide enough for Breck, and several times they had to pause while the Grothian carefully navigated around obstacles. Bliss served as forward eyes, floating ahead to check for hazards. Kethral found himself grateful for his 4 legs, which provided stability on the uneven ground. The canyon floor was darker than the surface, the high walls blocking much of the light. Strange sounds echoed from deeper in, the calls of imported wildlife, the rush of water through underground channels, the occasional rumble of shifting stone. The signal is stronger, Trick reported. We are getting close. They pressed on, following the scanner's guidance through a maze of narrow passages and open chambers. The environment felt alive around them, hostile in a way that seemed almost deliberate. Then, the trap was sprung. They emerged into a large chamber only to find it was not empty. 4 teams had arrived before them, alerted somehow to the beacon's location. They had formed a loose alliance, blocking the path forward with a wall of bodies. And, at the center of the chamber, mounted on a pedestal, was the beacon. "Stop there," called one of the team leaders, a Grothian even larger than Breck. "This beacon belongs to us." "I don't see your name on it," Emma replied. "There are 40 of us and 8 of you. Do the mathematics, human." Emma looked at the assembled teams. The Wrath, Grothian, Holland, Mallory, species that should have been scattered across different teams but had somehow coordinated to oppose her group. This was not a spontaneous alliance. This had been planned. "You all agreed to this?" she asked, addressing the crowd rather than the leader. "Throwing the games to stop us?" Uncomfortable shuffling answered her. Not everyone was happy with this arrangement, Kethral realized. Some had been pressured, others bribed. But they were committed now. "You represent a threat to the natural order," the Grothian leader said. "Your success cannot be allowed. Step aside, and no one gets hurt." Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. "No. No. No. We're not stepping aside. We came here to win fairly, and that's what we're going to do. You cannot hope to defeat us. Not even with your predators. Maybe not in a fight. But that's not how we do things." Emma turned to her team. "Remember what we trained for. Remember who we are. Let's show them what real cooperation looks like." What happened next was something Kethral would never forget. Emma moved first, walking directly toward the mass teams with her hands open and visible. No aggression, no fear. Just calm determination. "Stop," the leader commanded. "Do not come closer." "Or what? You'll hurt me? In front of all these witnesses? During an official academy event?" She kept walking. Behind her, her team spread out, not threateningly but strategically, positioning themselves to support each other. "We trained for this," Emma said, still walking. "For confrontation without violence. For standing our ground without losing ourselves. You can stop us with force, but you can't stop what we represent." She was within arm's reach of the front line now. The assembled teams were uncertain, their alliance fraying as Emma's words struck home. "Every one of you came to this academy to learn about cooperation between species. About understanding and working with those who are different from you. And now you're standing here, united against a team that's actually doing it? Does that make sense to any of you?" Murmuring rippled through the crowd. Kethral saw doubt on faces that had been certain moments before. "We're not your enemies," Emma continued. "We're your classmates. We're proof that everything this academy stands for is actually possible. Why fight that?" A Mallory near the back pulsed with agitation and began to drift away from the group. Then, a Holland followed, then, several the Wrath. The alliance was crumbling, its members unwilling to maintain aggression against such peaceful resistance. The Grothian leader saw his coalition dissolving and roared with frustration. "Enough! If none of you will act, I will." He lunged toward Emma with terrible speed, his massive form covering the distance in a heartbeat. He never reached her. Vexnar was there, interposing himself between the charging Grothian and Emma. The impact was tremendous, 2 massive beings colliding with enough force to shake the ground. But Vexnar held his position, absorbing the charge without giving an inch. "You will not harm her," he growled. "Move, Crethali. This is not your fight. She is my family. That makes it my fight." Vess appeared beside them, adding her strength to Vexnar's. Then, Breck, the Grothian of their team standing shoulder to shoulder with the Crethali predators. Then, Soral and Kethral and Trick and Gliss, all of them forming a wall of bodies around Emma. Not to attack. To protect. The Grothian leader stared at them, at this impossible collection of species standing united. Slowly, his aggression faded into confusion. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you care so much? Because she believed in us when no one else did, Vex Nar answered. Because she saw people where others saw monsters. Because she taught us that we could be more than what we were born to be. She taught all of you this? She taught me, Trick said in their small voice. She taught me that small does not mean worthless. She taught me, Gliss pulsed. She taught me that communication barriers are not walls. She taught me, Kethral added. She taught me that fear does not have to define relationships. One by one, they testified. Stories of how Emma had reached out, included, protected, inspired. Stories of transformation, of growth, of family found in the most unlikely places. When they finished, the chamber was silent. The remaining members of the opposing alliance had scattered, leaving only the Grothian leader. I have been wrong, he said finally. About humans. About predators. About all of it. It's not too late to learn, Emma said gently. That's what this academy is for. She stepped around him and walked to the beacon. Her team followed. With a simple motion, she lifted the device from its pedestal. Let's go home. The journey back to the extraction point was peaceful. Word had spread through the preserve of what had happened in the canyon chamber. No one tried to stop them. Instead, other teams fell in behind them, following like a strange procession. When they emerged from the preserve and crossed the finish line, the gathered observers erupted in cheers. Not just for their victory, but for what they represented. Administrator Prelax was waiting for them, her compound eyes bright with emotion. You have done something remarkable today, she said. Not just won the games. You have shown the entire academy what is possible when we truly embrace cooperation. Your methods, your philosophy, will be studied for generations. Emma looked at her team, at Vex Nar and Vess standing proud, at Trick perched on Breck's shoulder, at Gliss pulsing with joy, at Sorrel finally, allowing herself to smile, at Kethral who had found courage he never knew he had. We didn't do anything special, she said. We just chose to be better. Together. The games were over. But, for everyone who had witnessed what happened that day, something new was beginning. 3 months had passed since the Cooperation Games, and the Galactic Academy of Interspecies Relations had been transformed. The victory of Emma's team had sparked something that spread far beyond the walls of the institution, rippling outward through the galactic community like waves from a stone thrown into still water. Kethral stood at his window in the student residence, watching the morning light filter through the crystalline spires of the academy. Below him, students moved through the courtyards in groups that would have seemed impossible at the beginning of the cycle. Crethaly walked beside Volari. Pipri rode on the shoulders of Grothians. Mellori and Holland engaged in animated conversation, their light patterns and hand gestures creating a strange but beautiful form of communication. The changes had been gradual at first, then accelerating. After the games, students had begun seeking out Emma and her team, asking questions, wanting to understand how they had achieved what everyone assumed was impossible. Emma had answered every question patiently, explaining her philosophy of seeing individuals instead of species, of choosing connection over fear. Some had been skeptical. Some had rejected the ideas outright. But many had listened, had experimented, had tried reaching out to classmates they had previously avoided. And, once those connections were made, once the first barrier was crossed, it became easier to cross the next one. Now the academy was unrecognizable compared to what it had been. Species that had maintained careful distance for generations were forming friendships, study groups, social circles. The dining hall no longer had unofficial segregation by species. Classes were filled with students helping each other rather than competing. And, at the center of it all, even though she insisted she was not special, was Emma Chen. Kethral turned from the window as his door chime sounded. He opened it to find Trick floating there on a small platform, a gift from Breck, who had commissioned it from a Thessari engineer so the Pipri could move at the same height as everyone else. Good morning, Kethral. Emma asked me to gather everyone. There is news. What kind of news? Trick's antennae twitched with excitement. Important news. She would not say more, but she seemed very happy. They made their way to the common room that had become the unofficial headquarters of their group. The space had evolved over the months, accumulating objects and decorations that reflected each member's contribution. Volari prayer cloths hung beside Crethaly weapons that would never be used for violence. Pipri engineering diagrams shared wall space with Mellori light art. A massive Grothian composition hung in one corner, its musical notation beautiful even on paper. The others were already assembled when Kethral arrived. Vex and AR and Ves sat together on the reinforced couch that had been specially constructed for their weight. Bliss floated near the ceiling, their bioluminescence dimmed in relaxation. Breck occupied his usual spot in the corner, his rocky form somehow seeming softer than it had at the beginning of the cycle. Sorel was reviewing something on a tablet, her Holland discipline making relaxation impossible. And Emma sat in the center of the room, practically vibrating with contained excitement. Everyone's here. Good. She took a deep breath. I got a message this morning from the Human Diplomatic Corps. They've been following what's happened here at the Academy, and they want to formalize our methods. Formalize? Kethral asked, settling into his usual spot. They want to create a program based on what we've been doing. A curriculum for integration that focuses on cross-species relationship building, on seeing individuals instead of categories. They want to implement it at academies across the galaxy. The room went silent as the implications sank in. They want to teach what Emma taught us? Ves asked. To everyone? To anyone who wants to learn. It won't be mandatory, they understand that forced integration doesn't work. But they want to offer it as an option, to give people the tools to reach across species lines if they choose to. This is significant, Sorel said, her tactical mind already processing. If implemented properly, such a program could fundamentally alter interspecies relations across hundreds of systems. That's the idea. Emma looked around at her friends, her family. But there's more. They want us to help design it. All of us. They think our perspective as the ones who actually lived it is essential to making the program work. They want us specifically? Trick asked, their voice rising with surprise. I am just a pippery engineer. I have no expertise in social programs. You have expertise in being part of a cross-species family. That's exactly what they need. Vex and AR stirred, his massive form shifting. I have spent my entire life being told that Crethely cannot change, that our nature makes true cooperation impossible. Now you tell me that the galaxy wants to learn from our experience? The galaxy wants to learn that change is possible. You're proof of that, Vex and AR. You and Ves both. The female Crethely was quiet, her yellow eyes distant. When I arrived at this academy, she said finally, I expected to spend my time in isolation, avoided and feared by everyone. I expected to be alone. Instead, I found family. I found purpose. I found the ability to be more than what I was born to be. She looked at Emma with an expression that Kethral had learned to recognize as deep affection. If what we have built here can help others find the same thing, how could I say no? One by one, the others voiced their agreement. Bliss pulsed with enthusiastic light patterns. Breck rumbled his assent. Sorel nodded sharply, already making mental notes about implementation strategies. Trick's antennae waved with excitement. Kethral was the last to speak. He thought about everything that had happened since that first day, when he had stood in the orientation hall terrified of the apex predator and the Deathworlder who would be in his cohort. He thought about the journey from fear to understanding, from isolation to connection, from being a representative trying to manage conflicts to being a member of a family he had never expected to find. I have spent my entire life believing that fear was inevitable, he said slowly. That the divisions between species were natural and unchangeable. Emma showed me a different truth. If I can help show that truth to others, then this is what I was meant to do. Emma smiled, that human expression that no longer seemed threatening to anyone in the room. Then, we have a lot of work ahead of us. The following weeks were some of the most intense of Kethral's life. The Human Diplomatic Corps sent representatives to work with them, capturing their experiences and translating them into frameworks that could be taught. There were interviews, discussions, exercises to develop and test. The entire team was involved, each contributing their unique perspective. Emma proved to be an excellent leader of the project, though she continuously deflected credit to the others. She had a gift for articulating complex emotional concepts in ways that could be understood and applied. But she insisted that the program could not be about any single species or individual. It had to be about the fundamental truth that connection was possible between any beings who chose to reach for it. Vex and AR and Ves became central to the sections dealing with predator-prey dynamics. They spoke honestly about their struggles, about the ongoing battle against instincts that whispered of hunt and dominance. They explained how they had learned to redirect those impulses, to find satisfaction in protection rather than predation. The predator instinct never disappears, Vexenar told one of the diplomats during an interview Kethral observed. But it can be channeled. Instead of seeing others as prey to be hunted, I have learned to see them as pack members to be protected. The protective instinct is just as strong, just as fundamental. It simply serves a different purpose. And this redirection is sustainable, the diplomat asked. It does not cause psychological strain? It causes less strain than isolation did. Fighting against one's nature is difficult, but fighting alone is worse. When I have a pack to protect, the struggle has meaning. Without that meaning, I was slowly destroying myself. Trick contributed sections on the value of seemingly mismatched team members. Their engineering expertise helped develop frameworks for identifying complementary skills across species lines, showing how abilities that seemed incompatible could combine to achieve what neither could accomplish alone. Bliss worked on communication protocols, developing systems that allowed nonverbal species to integrate more fully with verbal ones. Their light-based language became a case study in adaptive communication, demonstrating that understanding did not require shared modalities. Breck, surprisingly, became one of the most effective spokespeople for the project. His massive size and intimidating appearance made his gentle nature all the more striking. He spoke about how assumptions based on physical characteristics had kept him isolated before Emma reached out, and how overcoming those assumptions had freed him to express the artistic soul he had always hidden. Soral brought tactical precision to the program design, ensuring that the emotional concepts were supported by practical exercises that could be replicated. Her Holland training, once focused on warfare, now served the cause of peace. And Kethral found his own role, documenting the journey, capturing the stories that illustrated what was possible. He wrote extensively about his own transformation, from fearful representative to committed family member. He hoped that other herbivores, other prey species, would read his words and see that fear did not have to be the end of the story. The program took shape over months of intensive work. When it was finally ready, it was presented to the Galactic Council for consideration. The team traveled to the council chambers on Thessar Prime, the heart of galactic governance, to speak in support of their creation. Kethral had never seen anything like the council chambers. They were vast beyond comprehension, designed to accommodate representatives from thousands of species. Beings of every shape and size filled the observation galleries, watching as the human and her strange team took their positions before the council. The Supreme Arbiter, a Tessari of ancient lineage, called the session to order. We are here to consider a proposal for galactic educational reform submitted by the Human Diplomatic Corps, with supporting testimony from the creators of the program. The speakers will present their case. Emma stepped forward. She looked small and fragile before the assembled might of galactic civilization, but her voice was strong and clear. Distinguished council members, observers, thank you for hearing us today. I'm Emma Chen, a human from Earth. Behind me are my friends, my family, beings from species that tradition and biology suggested should never work together. And yet here we stand, united, proof that connection is possible across any divide. She spoke of the academy, of the changes that had occurred since the cooperation games. She spoke of the program they had developed, the principles it was built on, the hope that it represented. We are not asking you to mandate this program, she said. We are not asking anyone to change who they are. We are simply offering tools for those who want to reach across species lines, who want to see individuals instead of categories, who want to build something better than what we inherited. Other team members spoke in turn. Vexenar's testimony about his journey from isolated predator to protective pack member visibly moved several council members. Trick's explanation of their engineering approach to team composition sparked interest among the more scientifically minded delegates. Bliss's light-based presentation demonstrated the very communication innovations the program promoted. When Kethral took his place, he found himself trembling slightly. But he thought of Emma's faith in him, of everything they had built together, and his voice steadied. I am Valari, he said. My species evolved as prey. We are timid by nature, inclined to flee from anything unfamiliar. When I learned that my cohort would include Crethali predators and a human Deathworlder, I was terrified. I believed that my role would be to manage conflicts between species that could never coexist peacefully. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I was wrong. The conflicts I expected never materialized, because Emma would not let them. She reached out to everyone, predator and prey alike, and showed us that we had more in common than we had ever believed. She did not change what we were. She showed us what we could become if we chose to work together. Through her example, I learned that fear is not a cage. It is a starting point. We can acknowledge our fears without being ruled by them. We can feel the instinct to flee and choose instead to stay. We can look at beings who should frighten us and see friends, family, partners in building something better. He looked at Emma, at Vex and AR, at all of them. The program we have developed is not about suppressing nature or pretending differences do not exist. It is about recognizing that our differences can complement rather than divide, that cooperation across species lines strengthens everyone involved. It is about choice, the choice to reach out instead of withdraw, to connect instead of fear, to see possibilities instead of barriers. I stand before you as living proof that this works. And I ask you to give others the chance to discover it for themselves. The council deliberated for 3 standard days. Kethral spent most of that time in the visitor quarters with his team, caught between hope and anxiety. Emma remained calm throughout, reminding them repeatedly that whatever the outcome, they had already changed the galaxy by changing themselves. When the summons finally came, they returned to the council chamber. The atmosphere was different now, charged with anticipation. Beings had come from across the galaxy to witness the decision. The Supreme Arbiter rose to deliver the verdict. The Council has reviewed the proposal for educational reforms centered on cross-species integration techniques. We have examined the evidence, heard the testimony, and consulted with experts across many fields. A pause that seemed to stretch forever. The proposal is approved. The program will be offered at educational institutions throughout galactic space, beginning with the academy systems and expanding as resources permit. Funding will be allocated for training facilitators and developing supplementary materials. Cheers erupted from the observation galleries. Kethral felt tears streaming down his face, a Volare response to overwhelming emotion that he no longer tried to suppress. Around him, his team celebrated in their own ways, Vex and AR's rumbling laugh, Trick's excited bouncing, Glissa's explosion of colorful light, Breck's earth-shaking stomp of joy. Emma stood in the center of it all, tears in her own eyes, accepting embraces from beings who had once feared her kind and now called her family. The Supreme Arbiter was not finished. The Council also wishes to recognize the individuals who developed this program. Their achievement represents the highest ideals of galactic cooperation. Each member of the team is hereby awarded the title of Ambassador of Integration, with all associated rights and responsibilities. Kethral barely processed the words. Ambassador. He, a timid Volare who had spent most of his life avoiding anything unfamiliar, was now an ambassador for building connections across species lines. In the celebration that followed, Kethral found himself standing beside Emma at an observation window, looking out at the vast expanse of stars. You did this, he said. You changed everything. Emma shook her head. We did this. All of us together. I just showed up and refused to let fear win. The rest was everyone choosing to be better. But, without you, without me, someone else would have eventually figured it out. The truth was always there, Kethral. Connection is possible. Understanding is possible. It just takes someone willing to take the first step. She turned to look at him, and, in her strange human eyes, he saw the same warmth that had drawn him in all those months ago. Do you know what I love most about the galaxy? She asked. What? How much potential it has. All these different species, all these different ways of being, and every single one of them is capable of amazing things if given the chance. We've only scratched the surface of what's possible when beings work together. There's so much more to discover, to build, to become. That is a very human perspective, Kethral said. Maybe. Or maybe it's just a true perspective that humans figured out because we had to. Our planet forced us to adapt, to cooperate, to find common ground with beings who could have been enemies. Now we get to share that lesson with the rest of the galaxy. Kethral looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had changed and everything that was still to come. I was terrified of you, he admitted. That first day at the academy, when I saw your name on the roster, I thought you would be a monster. A Deathworlder, a predator, everything my instincts warned me about. And, now I know that the greatest monster was my own fear. You showed me that I could choose something better. You showed all of us. Emma smiled and put her hand on his shoulder, that human gesture of connection that had once seemed so alien and now felt like home. That's what family does, she said. We show each other what's possible. And then, we help each other get there. Behind them, their team gathered predators and prey, Deathworlders and gentlefolk, beings who should have been enemies but had chosen instead to be something greater. The Galactic Academy had brought them together, but it was their choices that had made them family. And, somewhere out in the vast expanse of stars, other beings were beginning their own journeys toward connection. The program they had built would reach them, offer them tools and frameworks and hope. Some would reject it. Some would struggle. But some would succeed, would form bonds that transcended their differences, would discover the same truth that Kethral and his family had found. The galaxy was changing. Not through war or conquest or fear, but through something far more revolutionary, the simple human belief that everyone deserves to be seen, understood, and loved. Kethral looked at his family, at the impossible collection of beings who would become the most important thing in his life, and felt something he had never expected to feel, complete certainty that the future was bright. Because a human had enrolled at the academy. A human who refused to let fear define relationships. A human who saw people instead of species. And everything had changed. The Predator had enrolled in class, but the human Deathworlder had stolen the show not through dominance or violence or force, but through something far more powerful. Through love. Through choosing, again and again, to reach out instead of withdraw. Through proving that the galaxy's greatest strength was not any single species, but what all species could become when they worked together. The stars glittered with possibility, and Kethral smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning.